Rev it up and welcome to Cars Yeah, show number 2520. Today we're going to be talking about history of Porsche racing up to 1968. There's a lot to fill for a show, so be prepared to be inspired.
This is Cars Yeah, where you'll enjoy interviews with inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Mark Green is here to provide you with a fuel injection of automotive inspiration. So get in, sit down, buckle up, and get ready for a wild ride here on Cars Yeah.
Hello, inspiring automotive enthusiasts, and welcome to Cars Yeah. Today I'm in beautiful Santa Barbara, California, with a very special, actually a returning guest. He was here a while ago, though, Randy Leffingwell. Randy, welcome back to Cars Yeah. Do you have any gear, and are you ready to release the clutch?
The left leg is poised, sir. Let's do it.
So last time you were here, I didn't ask you this question because it's something new and it's a little bit of an icebreaker that I do with my guests. What's one little thing that people may not know about Randy Leffingwell?
Oh, heavens. I'm not sure what people do know about me. Let's see, born in the Midwest. Grew up in a family that valued reading and art and music and theater. And my dad worked in downtown Chicago. And whenever I had a day off from school, I put on my little suit and went downtown with my dad. And then while he did his business, I went to the Chicago Art Institute and absorbed as much beauty as I could in a day before my brain exploded. I don't know. I've been enchanted with automobiles since age 4 or 5. My uncle had a Speedster, and then he had a Triumph TR3, and then he had, for a very short time, he had a Ferrari Lusso, and then got one of the first 289 Mustang convertibles, and all this from a guy who was a banker.
Wow.
So he was, let's say, pushing the limits. And I think it may have affected his career, but it certainly impacted his happiness in a good way.
Yeah. I would imagine the customers driving up to the bank and seeing a Ferrari Lusso parked out front, they'd go, I don't know. Is this guy spending my money wisely that I'm putting in this account? But he's had some very cool cars, so I think that's fun. Well, let me give you a little bit of a proper introduction. And for you listeners that would like to go back and listen to the first time that Randy was a guest here, that was back in January 2019, before the world was turned on its ear with COVID and so forth. That was show number 1215. And like all the shows here at Cars Yeah, you can find that on the Cars Yeah website or any mobile podcast app. So go back and you can learn a little bit more about his personal life, because today we're going to be talking about a new book. Randy Leffingwell is an author, writer, and photographer who has spent over 5 decades in the automotive sector. He worked for the Kansas City Star and then Chicago with the Sun-Times. His passion for automobiles led him to AutoWeek magazine. We all remember that publication. And the LA Times. He's written many articles for Pete Stout's 000 magazine. Of course, Pete's been on the show a couple times, and I subscribe to that wonderful magazine, so I'm still enjoying Randy's writings. And this is due to his vast knowledge of the Porsche marque. And Randy has authored numerous books as well. Photography is a significant part of his life to this day. Today, he's here to share his book titled Against All the Others, Porsche's Racing History, Volume 1 through 1968 from David Bull Publishers. The book meticulously details technical developments and nuances of each racing venue and offers race-by-race commentary. At 432 pages, it's an intensive and keen insight into the personalities and their approaches taken in the cockpit for Porsche. We'll be back in just a moment, but first a word from our friends here, so give them a little love, and we'll be right back. Buckle up. Cars Yeah is proud to support our veterans, which is why I've teamed up with our nonprofit partner, TechForce Foundation, through its Veterans at Work Military Transition Campaign. The tech shortage is very real, and our country needs skilled, qualified techs to keep our cars, trucks, airplanes, and fleets rolling. When so many vets build their skills in maintaining and servicing vehicles when deployed, TechForce helps transition those skills to jobs as professional technicians when they come home. Learn more about TechForce Foundation and its Veterans at Work Military Transition Fund at techforce.org today. For several years now, you've heard me talk about Linkage Magazine. I've been a subscriber since the start. Their talented and creative team brings you a spectacular publication and website that shares the automotive passion from a worldwide perspective. Linkage is about driving, restoring, collecting, and first-hand experience at collector car auctions and more. They bring you real-world values plus rational, experienced opinions on the current markets. They cover the automotive world and the people who share our passions. And Linkage Magazine has grown, mailing you 6 issues annually. Join me on this journey with Linkage. They're geared for the automotive life. You can subscribe at linkagemag.com. So, Randy, we are back. This book, which I need to pump some more iron to be able to pick it up off my table because it is a massive. I want to start off with when you undertake writing a book that has this much detail, how and where do you start?
There's a wonderful novelist I know who years and years ago wrote a book called Bird by Bird. Her son had to do an examination of several hundred birds, and he kept lamenting, Mom, how am I going to do it? How am I going to do it? How am I going to do it? And she said, you're going to do it bird by bird. And that was pretty much how I approached this. When Dieter Landenberger and Jens Torner asked me to do this thing, originally I just thought, well, this is going to be fascinating. I'll start right after World War II, the mid-40s, basically days, weeks after the war ends, and carry it on from there. And Dieter said, no, Randy, Ferdinand Porsche raced his first car he ever built in 1899.
Uh-oh, you got to go a little further back now.
Yeah, and so that really organized the book for me. It was going to be chronological. It was going to just tackle, well, and then he said that they really wanted the thing to be encyclopedic and comprehensive. And that kind of opens a door to either Alice's rabbit hole or a deep world into dark space. Mark, I mean, honestly, it was easier than you might think or fear, because once you figure out what you're doing, which is telling the story of Porsche racing, well, that story has certain elements. It has the racing drivers, it has the engineers, it has the car designers, it has the venues, it has the owners of the venues, it has the fans, it has the journalists. And so you just start building these card files. And I ended up with a 4x6 index card file that's pretty vast.
Yeah, it's like those old cards you used to have to go through at a library to find a book. Those index files, I can't imagine. Now at this many pages, many times when authors, writers talk to publishers, they're given a word count. You can't exceed this much because the book can't be any bigger than this for all these different, usually economic reasons. Do you even have a word count in this book?
Well, I actually have a contract for it, and the contract called for one volume, 400 pages, 300 to 400 photos, plus captions. And ironically, that's exactly what I delivered, only my book covered a single year, rather than the 100 I have decided to cover. That took some pretty massive reorganization in my head and on paper. But yeah, I mean, there is a word count. If I told you I was above 2 million words for the series.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Wow. And obviously with this being volume 1, is there a volume 2 coming then?
Yes, we are working on it now.
Wow.
Volume 2 is 1969. Now, I'm not doing one volume for every single year of this racing century. There's a lot of double up that starts pretty soon. But the reason I chose 68 is because that is a pivotal year in racing. We step into Porsche's racing at the point where key players were reinventing themselves and either stepping away or investing themselves further. Ford, through regulations, was done. Ferrari, through regulations, was deepening its commitment, even though its chief engineer, Mauro Forgieri, really wanted to stick with Formula One. Enzo knew that the sports car races helped him sell cars, and selling cars was what supported his racing exactly as it is with Porsche. So volume 1 is 68, volume 2 is 69, volume 3 is 70, volume 4, 71, volume 5, 72 and 3, which is Can-Am years. And then volume 6 becomes sort of like a cinematic flashback. It starts in 1974. Remember, OPEC basically shut down all the automotive fun in October of 73. Motorsports pretty much stopped in 74. And so that becomes an abbreviated enough year that it was a natural one to turn this whole thing around and say, well, while we have a break in the action here, let's go back and look at the beginning. And at that point, I jump all the way back to Ferdinand's birth in 1875. And the first 25 years are pretty quick, but that volume then takes us all the way back through 1933.
Oh my gosh.
You know, when Dieter said you're going back to the beginning of the beginning, at the very beginning, before the beginning, I about fell on the floor. But as I began doing the research and then got further and further into it, I realized how visionary the man was and how, of course, how knowledgeable he was of Porsche's racing and Porsche's history. There is so much formative development and experience in those first 50 years that I was going to ignore. And those first 50 years absolutely set up the company for the way it is now, for the profitability it has now, for the racing successes it has now, for the personalities it has now. It all came together in that first half century that I was going to ignore.
So you're basically a job secure until you're 90-something, does it sound like?
Well, I hope so. Most of it is already written. I have written the text, completed the text through the mid-90s, and the series will stop at 1999. I joked with some friends at Porsche that I was going to write about the first 100 years of Porsche's racing and let someone else do the second 100, and they loved that joke.
Exactly. Well, and I remember those days of OPEC because that's right when I got my driver's license or my learner's permit at 15, and all of a sudden you couldn't get gas for your car. So I was like, what the heck is going on here?
Not fair.
Yeah, not fair. Well, life's not fair, as my mom used to say. My dad, get used to it. So let's talk a little bit about inspiration. You have been so involved through your writing with Porsche. You know the marque so well. This might be a challenging question, but I like to ask people who are most influential in your lives. Is there one person in the Porsche world that you could I know there's lots of folks out there, but maybe just for our talk today, slot into a most influential, mentorish type person from the Porsche world?
Oh, gosh, that's a very interesting question. And it's actually because of something that just happened. It's easier to respond to than I would have thought. That would be Norbert Singer. He's just turned 85, and he was a racing engineer who joined Porsche in early 1970. But the reason that I pick Norbert is he is like William Shakespeare's Puck. The merry prankster, playful, clever, ingenious plot mover. Norbert has an incredible skill at reading instructions, reading regulations, and learning not only what is there, but learning what is not there, and then how he can apply what they don't disallow to make his race cars better. And I've had, over the course of working on this book, I've probably had a dozen conversations with Norbert, 4 or 5 of them many hour-long interviews. He's just a wonderful, charming man with an absolutely great sense of humor.
Yes. He's somebody, maybe you can introduce me to him. I've always wanted to have on this show just because of his prowess. Has anyone ever written an autobiography on him? I think there might be a book. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a book called 24:16, which is 16 victories of the 24 Hours of Le Mans. And it is quite insightful. He's just a fascinating guy.
No doubt. Well, Norbert, if you're listening, happy birthday. His birthday was on November 16th, 85 years old. What a life that gentleman has lived. Yeah, well, that makes sense. I having known it was just his birthday, I kind of thought you might answer that way just because of the prowess and experience and, talents and everything above that could describe that man. Challenges are a good thing for all of us. They might not be fun during them, but they teach us a lot of things. I'm going to twist this up since you've been on the show a little bit before. What was, in your mind, having written this particular volume, Porsche's biggest challenge in racing that they faced that may have pushed them to the brink at the time?
How much time do we have?
As much as you need.
I would guess. No, it's not really a guess. Their biggest challenges for a number of years were understanding FIA regulations and how they could be worked to benefit Porsche. The FIA seems to have this, I won't say magical, but it does have, it's the counterbalance to racing enthusiasm and brilliant engineering, in that the FIA represents manufacturers as well as venue owners as well as racing teams, and their goal is to kind of equalize the playing field. They know from racetrack owners that, for example, in the years when Porsche was winning, in the 80s, for example, when Porsche had the 956 and the 962s here in the States, the FIA was well aware of the fact that spectators were getting bored seeing a Porsche parade at very high speeds. Mm-hmm. Same with the 35s a decade before. In the meantime, Porsche's engineers are trying to work within the restrictions they've got to get around the FAA regulations. As I said, it was one of Norbert's brilliances, but so it was with Hans Metzger, the engine wizard, and with Valentin Schaefer, the turbocharger magician, Horst Reiter, the chassis engineer. These men, their biggest challenge was, I guess, beating the rules.
Well, there's always got to be rules there, and I think the king of rule breakers are the NASCAR guys. They always kind of have been, figuring out ways around things. But, that's part of the challenge I see is not so much people might say, well, it's cheating. But no, it's working within the boundaries, and especially when you think about science and engineering, that's what they're always doing is, how can we build this bridge that looks beautiful and allows all these cars over it and doesn't fall into the Puget Sound like the Narrows Bridge where I live did when they first built the first one. You're always challenged.
Wasn't it Smokey Yunick who said you're only cheating if you get caught?
Yeah, and I think it was George Costanza in Seinfeld said, it's not a lie if you believe it. So, yeah, I guess it's how you interpret things in any way. But I remember my dad once, I think I got caught telling a fib as a kid. And I remember him saying well, when you said it, you knew it wasn't right, correct? And of course, at that point, with tears in my eyes, I had to say, yes, sir. He goes, well, then that's a lie. So use that as the definition going forward. Yeah. And here I am talking about it in my 66th year here. So thanks, Dad, for reminding me to tell the truth. When you think about this first volume, what is the one race car in that era that would be your favorite and why?
The 908 series. It immediately preceded the 917s. In fact, it was concurrent with them. If I had to pick a single one of those, a single version of it, it would be the 908-3, which was the final Spider open car in the series. It was like a 360 horsepower roller skate. It was a short wheelbase, ultra lightweight, ultra reliable engine. It used a V8 in a variety of displacements. Oh no, I'm misspeaking. The 908 was always 3 liters, and it was used primarily for tracks where open space visibility was crucial. So its greatest successes were at the Nürburgring and the Targa Florio, where the drivers basically had to spin their heads around like Mr. Bubbleheads to keep a sense of where they were on the road. The 908 is the favorite of a lot of drivers who I really admire. I know Brian Redmond loved it. Vic Elford loved it. It was, as I said, it was just a rocket-fast little car. Dirt simple lines. kind of a shovel nose, a slab sides, flat top leading to a kind of an exaggerated gurney lip rear spoiler. And it was just one extremely potential racing weapon.
As I recall, Helmuth Bott and Metzger were designers on that car, chassis and engine designers. Do I have that right?
Yeah, Bott from the start had been more of a chassis engineer. By the time the 908 came around, Bott was running Weissach. Hans Metzger, of course, made the engine. Helmut Flegel was hired to, I think he joined in 68 or 69, and he was hired to resolve some handling problems and some suspension problems with the 908. And, I'll get to that in volume 2. Mm-hmm. There are some very, very funny stories. Helmut Flegel is an interesting man, and he gets some criticisms from colleagues and fans, but he was a very clever, very devoted, very sharp engineer. And he was willing to experiment. He was willing to listen to others, and he was willing to make mistakes. One of his mistakes did get him sort of a round of raspberries from the mechanics. He had put so much anti-dive suspension adjustment on a race car that when the drivers did their first panic stop tests, the nose of the car actually lifted.
Lifted? Oh my gosh.
Because he had designed a suspension that was so effective at anti-dive, at not letting the nose go to the ground, that in fact it did the reverse, and of course created pretty interesting, terrifying instability. And he was the first to admit, he said, I really got that one wrong, and they laughed at me.
Talk about understeer. My goodness. I mean, come into a corner at high speed and you go to turn in and the car goes, nope, tires are off the ground. Sorry. So, yeah, those are beautiful cars. I mean, I love those things. I think they weighed all of about 1,400 pounds. But the fact that, going from the 917, which was this long, sleek thing, especially when you got into the long bodies, and then go to these little bulldog cars. But when I had Vic Elford, the late great Vic, on my show, he talked about these. He talked about, of course, the 917s, which everybody loves, the iconic, but he talked about how much you like the 908s. And having gone to historic races, I love seeing those things run because they almost, to me, they kind of remind me of when I was a kid with slot cars. They're just these little beep, beep, point and shoot things, right? Yep.
Slot cars or Hot Wheels. They're a very, very, very effective toy from Porsche.
Well, good choice. I like that. I like that you went there with those. So here's a bit of an introspective question. I'm going to crawl into your head and become a car psychologist. So lay back on the couch and give this a thought. If you were to be reincarnated as a Porsche race car, I usually ask any car, but I'm going to ask you as a Porsche race car. And the way I want you to think about this, Randy, is not what you want to be. Like you talked about the 908s being special. This is more of a race car that is kind of who you are deep down inside. So you got to kind of dig into the man in the mirror a little bit for me here. I'm kind of pushing you on these goofy questions here today, but which Porsche race car would you be and why?
That is one heck of a question.
One crazy question, right?
Maybe the second generation 917 Longtails. They were known as the 917-40 because by that time, Porsche had already developed the 917-10 for Can-Am, and the 917-20 was the one that Porsche people called Big Bertha, and we all know as the Pink Pig.
Yep.
The 917-30 was the number that was set aside for the second generation Can-Am cars. And the 917-40 was the car they raced at Le Mans in 71. And it's the one that had the partially enclosed rear wheels. It had a much lower nose. It was truly an endurance car, really designed, built, created, perfected for completing a long, hard task. And as a book author, that's sort of my job. But that's a very, very, very interesting question. And I know that 2.5 minutes after we get done with this conversation,
You'll
I'm going
pick
to say,
something else.
what was I thinking? I really meant the so-and-so, or I meant the this, or
Yeah.
because there's so many incredibly cool Porsche race cars.
Oh, I know. I remember that car at Rennsport on display sitting next to the number 46, one of the first race cars, and the red one with the white stripes that kind of are all over the car and stuff. And I think that's kind of one of my favorites of that era, just the way they did the graphics on it. It just looked like it was moving, Yeah, in such a fast way. So nice answer to that question. That trips a lot of people up, but I think you did that very, very well. Of course, we always ask about great books here, and today we're talking about Randy Leffingwell's new book, Against All the Others, Porsche Racing History, Volume 1, 1968. I'll put a link to that on Randy's show notes page, but it's easy to find. You can go to David Bull Publishing. They've got it there just in time for the holidays. And I always say, if you want to buy your car buddy, who's impossible to buy for, a very cool gift that'll last a lifetime, books are the way to do it. This book sits on my library shelf, and it should sit on yours. So we're going to go on, before I let you go today and get started on the other volumes that you're working on, is the Ultimate Drive. And the way this game works is I'm going to put you in any car. You can take it anywhere, and you can be with anybody. But this is how I'm going to twist it up for you, Randy. There's got to be a Porsche race car from that era. You can drive it on any track, so I'm going to let you go at it anywhere in the world. And I know all these cars, I think they had actually a passenger seat. I know mostly no one ever rode in them, but if you could take somebody with you, or maybe if you sat in the passenger seat, somebody like Vic drove, or Brian Redmond or someone else, that could happen too if you'd rather not be doing the driving. So what does the Ultimate Drive look like for you?
Another true perplexer, sir. You are truly devilish today.
Well, I don't want to make it too easy on you.
No chance of that, pal.
No.
I might just go back to that 908. I think that I would probably, the 908-3, that is, I would probably be, I don't know. I just had a funny thought. The 908-2 was of course, the second generation 908, and it was a Spider. They made a short tail and a long tail version, and one of the long tail versions, the nickname for those cars, because of their undulating shape but very wide low body, was they were called flunder or flounder, which is a deep water fish that floats on its side.
Yeah.
And one of those things with Herbert Linga and, was it? I can't remember. I think it was Richard Price, ran in the 16 in Le Mans. I'm going to get this wrong. I've got too many years rolling through my head right this minute.
Yeah, no kidding.
But it was loaded with 3 Aeroflex movie cameras shooting film for Steve McQueen's epic Le Mans.
Oh, of course.
And
Yes.
they had to stop every 11 minutes to reload the film cameras. Now, I imagine that thing was more like racing a tank than racing a live 908-2 Flunder. But I think doing a lap or two of Le Mans with Linga driving with those cameras in it,
oh wow,
might be a really interesting experience.
That is an interesting answer to that question. Well, at least you wouldn't be going full speed, which would scare the hair off of anybody's head with these guys, Linga or Vic or any of those guys driving. I mean, it's just hard to imagine they even did that stuff, right?
No, they raced. They were in it. The organizers, the ACO, the Auto Club of the West, organizers of Le Mans basically said, if that thing's not out there going full speed, we'll black flag it.
Wow. Okay.
So it finished, unofficially, it finished 11th overall.
Oh my God.
Because those two guys were driving it. And the other thing was, when their instructions, Linga's instructions were, anytime he saw Golf blue or Ferrari red in the rearview mirror, turn the rear cameras on. Anytime he came around a corner and saw Golf blue or Ferrari red in front of him, turn the camera on. So in order to get the footage that film has, he had to be going as fast as they were.
Holy cow. That's hard to imagine, right?
Think about that.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, you just think of what that that equipment did to the handling characteristics of the car. Of course, the race car drivers get used to any car. After, a couple laps, they go, okay, this is going to be doing this, going to be doing that. But that still is pretty amazing. I didn't know that they told them they had to run.
Oh, yeah.
They couldn't be a moving chicane.
Exactly. It was not a camera car out there being a moving chicane. It was a camera car out there racing.
Wow. Well, again, you gave us another very unique answer. I appreciate that. Before I let you go, I always like to ask my guests for some parting words of wisdom, a mantra, a saying that you like. Is there one that maybe relates to the Porsche racing campaign? And I'll remind you, when you were on the show back in 2019, your words of wisdom were, do it right.
I'm going to stick with those.
Stick with that.
Yeah, really been, a fellow I worked with way back in the 1990s threw that at me at my very first meeting with him. And it has become kind of the mantra by which I do all of what I do, whether it's make a photograph or write a book, do it right.
Pretty simple. Yeah. Kind of sounds like the Nike quote. So pretty simple. And it works for just about everything that you work on. Randy, this has been great fun. I want to do a shout out to our friends at David Bull Publishing who brought you and I back together today. Wonderful group of people. And for those of you listening that love car books, who want to give car books as gifts, David Bull Publishing, they just produce the best of the best of the best. I'm so happy. I think I have all their books on my shelf here. Of course, I had to reinforce it because they're huge books, but they're all good. And if you get your hands on this book, and you should, Randy's new book, again, is just absolutely fantastic. The title, Against All the Others, Porsche Racing History, Volume 1, 1968. And then you can look forward to the subsequent volumes coming out to add that to your library shelf. Randy, hey, thank you for taking a pit stop with me today. It's so fun to talk to you again. Kudos, congratulations for this book, another wonderful book. I've got all your books, by the way, on my shelves as well. Until you and I talk again, you're welcome. Until you and I talk again, my friend, I'll see you down the road.
Mark, thanks so much for this chance to talk with you. It was really fun.
Really good. Have a wonderful, wonderful, peaceful, and family and friend-filled holiday season, okay?
Thanks to you too, sir.
You betcha. If you're listening to this program, there's a pretty good chance you believe what I believe, that the collector vehicles we love are more than just a means of getting from one place to the other. They're a part of our culture, our identity, and as a people, they bring us together at vintage races, classic car auctions, and 1,000-mile rallies. That's why I support the RPM Foundation, which exists to ensure that the critical skills necessary to preserve and restore these important vehicles aren't lost to time. RPM stands for Restoration, Preservation, and Mentorship, and their goal is to inspire the next generation of vehicle restoration professionals through its outreach programs. And they include Shop Hop, Off to the Races, the RPM Future Class, and many others. These programs engage talented young people across the country and connect them with mentors and a variety of opportunities in the industry. For more information on how the RPM Foundation is driving the future of collector vehicles skilled trade, visit rpm.foundation today.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's ride here at Cars Yeah. Drive on over to carsyeah.com to find show notes and inspiring automotive fun. Download your free copy of Filler Up, a fun book filled with gorgeous photographs of fuel filler fun, including quotes from more inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Download your copy today, and we'll see you next time on Cars Yeah.